When you get a moment, please take a seat, starting momentarily. Thank you. Please take a seat when you can. You can silence your cell phones. Put your phone on vibrate, or you can turn it low. That'd be great. I want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to mention Red Tuvia, Steve and Anna are also members of Red Tuvia congregation, Bethel, right, in Bradenton. Yep. So he loved your synagogue, he loved you, he joined your synagogue because he liked you. How's that? Yes, he did. I want to thank the church members for coming. They're also renting our facility. We want to welcome them as well. The way we're going to be continuing this celebration of life / memorial service, I'll be reading a few Psalms, and then we're going to be calling Samantha up to read Steve's bio, and then we're going to call Amara up. She's going to read a poem about a life well lived. We're also going to call Steve Valor up, our president of Congregation Beth Shalom in Brandon. Robert is going to have a video that he wants to show, about 20-25 minutes. And I will be concluding with a little something about Steve as well, and finishing up with the El Mole prayer and the Mourner's Cottage. And then Reb Tuvia will lead us in the blessing of the bread and the wine. What do you think, Reb Tuvia?
Of course.
Thank you very much. Okay. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We say in Hebrew, Adonai Natan, God has given us a loved one who will never be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai Lakach, God, you have taken away, and we pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust, before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love. Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. Blessed be the name of God, now and forever. We'll now call Samantha up. Samantha is Steve's daughter that lives in New Mexico.
Thank you all for being here today. So interestingly, after my dad died, I offered to my mom, to write, help write an obituary. And she said, well, okay, we need to get some dates together and things like that. Let me take a look. So she looked at the computer, and lo and behold, what did she find? She found my dad's words that he had written sometime we don't know exactly when, in the last several months, which, if you knew my dad, you knew that he loved talking about himself and all of his experiences. And it wasn't in a way that he was arrogant, right? He was a pretty, actually, humble person. He didn't think he was better than anyone else. He just really enjoyed talking about everything that he did. And I think he passed, tried to pass that on to me. But, so I try not to be too humble either. But here we go. These are his words. Stephen Feldman, age 81, of Apollo Beach, died December 22nd, 2023. Born in Philadelphia, he attended Temple University and its School of Dentistry, graduating with a DDS in 1967. He then joined the Air Force as captain, assigned to Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino, California, and became its preventive dental officer. While there, he met Sergeant Anna Feldman, who he married in March of 1969. Following his release from the Air Force, he joined the New Jersey Army National Guard in 1969, and then in 1976 transferred to the Army Reserves in Kentucky, retiring there as a colonel in 1998. He trained in periodontics at Loyola University of Chicago and became certified in 1971, joining the faculty of New Jersey Dental School that year, teaching periodontics and coordinating preventive dentistry, which became his professional passion. In 1976, he transferred to the University of Louisville, where he continued to teach periodontics and preventive dentistry, and also was director of continuing dental education and community services. He volunteered to do numerous dental exams and preventive talks in the community, and frequently appeared as a guest in the visual, audio, and print media on preventive dentistry topics. He also published numerous scientific articles in professional journals and gave professional presentations at national dental meetings, retiring in 2002. He also contributed numerous letters to the editor to newspapers, a favorite hobby of his. He was also an avid photographer and has thousands of pictures cataloged in his numerous albums, some of which we brought here today. In the past 19 years, he has lived in Florida, where he was a member of Congregation Beth Shalom of Brandon. Unfortunately, the community surrounding the temple is suffering from both housing and food insecurity, as it is in many communities. Given that it is one of the very important tenets from God, he felt it was incumbent upon him to volunteer in the monthly food bank, which is part of the outreach programs at his synagogue. He is survived by his wife, Anna, his daughter, Samantha Feldman Ashby, and his 2 grandchildren, Rowan and Amara, who live in New Mexico. And I'll just say one more thing about my dad. He taught me that you can be a man in this society and you can still be sensitive and express your feelings. My dad always did that. He always loved me and supported my children, and I'll just miss him always. Okay, I'm going to call up Amara now.
Poem called Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep by Mary Elizabeth Fry. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there, I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow, I am the diamond winds on snow. I am the sun on ripened grain, I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circle flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there, I did not die. Thank you.
Before I continue, I want to help thank the ladies who helped out and they set everything up. We have Julie, Merrill, Petey, Sharon, anybody I missed? Whoever I missed, we thank you, Steve Ballore was there to help out this morning, and we really do appreciate all your help, and Jeffrey as well. We're going to be calling Steve Ballore up, President of Congregation Beth Shalom in Brandon, because he had many conversations with Steve, right? In the library, in the library.
So I'll keep it short, but just starting out, it's just so wonderful to see people get together in this celebration of life of Steve. We don't get to see each other as often as we like, but this is a wonderful time, and I know Steve is very, very happy and thankful that everyone from all these years back from the congregation and other places are here to honor him. So I won't take too much of your time, but I just want to say a couple of things about a person I consider to be a very good friend. Steve and I shared great memories about our Air Force as veterans. We had great conversations about the military, some of the places we had been. It was always a highlight when we talked about the different places around the world that we would travel to. But most importantly, Steve was a great supporter of my jokes. Steve was also a very formidable power with such a quiet way about him. He was so open-minded, and he listened to anyone's point of view. He may not have changed his mind, but he definitely listened to you and respected your points. When I became president of the Congregation Beth Shalom, Steve was a confidant and a sounding board for me as I reviewed my own performance as temple president. He supported me and had such great grounded views and gave me such important advice and confidence when I carried out my duties and responsibilities. We were all just better people for knowing Steve Feldman. In honor of Steve, I'm going to end with a joke. So there was these two young children who were at a wedding, and they were sitting in the back, and one little boy says to the other little boy, "Wow, I've just never been to a wedding before." He says, "Oh, it's no big deal. I've been to a dozen of them. I know all about them." So the little boy who had never been to a wedding before, he asked him, says, "How many times can you be married?" Yeah. The guy says, 16. 4 better, 4 worse, 4 richer, 4 poorer. Thank you all for coming, and Steve would have loved that joke.
We're now going to call up Robert. Robert has a video that he wants to share with you. He's worked on it very hard. Robert also is with Samantha in New Mexico.
Excuse me.
Rabbi Beal wants to, Ira is right, he wants to speak a few words if he could.
Go ahead. Ira, okay. Ira, please come up. Ira would like to say a few words. By the way, Ira and his wife live in Maryland.
Right.
And I know his wife would come down and stay with Annie and Steve. Right? Yeah. And you would stay in the hotels correcting term papers.
Okay, so can everyone hear me? Okay, so my name is Ira Albert, and this is my wife Sharon, sitting down there in the front row there. In 1977, we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where I was about to assume the teaching slot at the local community college. And shortly after we arrived in Louisville, Sharon got a call from a total stranger. Her name was Anna Feldman, okay? And she was calling for Hadassah, which is a Jewish religious organization, and she was inviting Sharon to have lunch with her and another woman. So that moment was very significant because it triggered a 46-year friendship with the Feldman family. So we have been friends of theirs for 46 years, long time. So after the lunch, I met with Steve for the first time, and we bonded instantly. We were both committed to teaching. He was at the dental school, I was at a community college. Steve was a wonderful mentor to many students. He gave them advice very openly, guidance, so he really helped many students over the years to achieve their goals. And as all of you know, Steve was a really interesting person. He was well-read. He could talk about all kinds of things in great detail. As you just heard, he traveled extensively, and he and Ann shared this devotion to the military for many years. It was always fun to hear his experiences, how he grew up in Philadelphia, how he chose dentistry for his profession. He really wanted to be a radio talk personality, and his mother kind of encouraged him to go into dentistry, so that's the way he went there. It was real, and you're going to see in the video how he met Ann, I think, and how that went. Some of his stories were very humorous. One of the stories he told me that really stuck in my mind was how he spent the night in the Tijuana jail. He spent, believe it or not, Steve spent a night he was in the Army, and evidently he was a little inebriated, and he got into a little argument with one of the taxi drivers. And because of that, he got arrested, and he got into jail. They sent him to jail for one night, and then evidently he paid off one of the guards, and he was able to get out of there. And as many of you know, Steve loved food. Okay, food was very important in his life. And so right now, he would be salivating at this wonderful thing that you have set up here. Evidently, when he was growing up in Philadelphia, his parents took him just about every night to a restaurant, just to a local diner, usually. And they would have a full-course meal. So food was really important to Steve. He loved many foods as long as they were not vegetables. He did not care for vegetables. And Ann, of course, had the difficult task of getting him to eat healthier food and to exercise. And he normally would try as hard as he could to go along with that. However, every once in a while, when we were going for a little walk, he would sneak into a store and get a latte or something like that. But he did do the best he could to eat some vegetables every once in a while. Okay, so when we were in Louisville, we went to many places with Steve, Ann, and Samantha was a little girl at the time. We visited many, in the summer, Kentucky has excellent state parks. And during the summers, we would go to state parks. We went to lots of amusement parks when the kids were really little. And whenever you went somewhere with Steve and Ann, you knew that it was going to be an interesting time and you were going to have a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun to be with. Then they moved to California, and we got out there for a week or so. And we thought, well, we'll visit a while, we'll rent a car, we'll drive around a little. However, when we got there, Steve announced that they were going with us. And Steve was a great planner. He surprised us, and he planned this whole itinerary. He knew exactly where we were going to go, what we were going to see, the restaurants we were going to eat at. He had this planned out in great detail. At each place, and you heard this, he loved taking pictures. Everywhere we went, he would take pictures. And, you know, a lot of these, he has thousands of pictures. Some of them you're seeing here today. And then they moved to Albuquerque in Florida, and the same patterns continued. And we used to meet them in Myrtle Beach. We had lots of fun in Myrtle Beach. And of course, Steve and Ann were always very involved in political kinds of things. Most of the local politicians knew them by name. And of course, Steve loved to write editorials in the paper about all sorts of issues. And even in the past few days when he was very sick, he continued to write articles for the local paper. So we're going to miss Steve a lot. He gave us a lot of joy and happiness to Anna and everybody in this room. And hopefully, and I'm sure, he will rest in peace. And he left a lot of positive memories for everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Robert, and well, we're going to watch a video. Some of you have already seen it, but I thought it would be a great way to have him be in the room with us. And instead of hearing his story, let him tell the story about his own life. And the impetus for this video came in September when we got some bad news about his condition. And I was like, first thing that came to my mind was, well, we have to document his life, before it gets too late. So we made plans to come at Thanksgiving, and about 2 weeks before we arrived here in Tampa, I gave him an assignment to answer 10 questions. And I thought I was going to have to kind of push him along the way, and in fact I told Ann to keep him on track, but it was amazing because he worked diligently every day to answer. I got in the mail a single space, 1 or 2 pages each day. He was diligently working on this, and so we come in 4 days before Thanksgiving, and we start working on it. And not only was Steve ready, but he had cue cards, and he had almost memorized everything. It was unbelievable. But looking back on this time, because we had 2 days to record. And in fact, I was in such a rush. We got off the plane, we came, I took a run for about 50 minutes, and in the video you'll see I'm still in my running shorts. I hadn't changed out, because I knew we had 2 days. On the 3rd day, he was supposed to get chemotherapy. And that's the day we got the news that they were discontinuing the chemotherapy and they're going to put him on hospice. So looking back at this period of time, it was truly a miracle to get Steve at this vital time. He was so alive and had such passion for life, and it came through on this video. And I believe quickly after we left, things changed for him drastically, and it was truly a miracle that we got this performance from him. He is so alive and vital, and I thought there's no better way but to honor his life, but to have him in the room with us right now. And when I was talking with Ann, I kind of, she said I was going to tell her about editing and trying to find little pieces here and there to get the whole story, but I watched these chunks and I was like, wait a minute, it feels like he's here. So I have 2 sections to watch, and it would be nice to watch it with everyone. So I'll get it started, and I'll try to adjust the volume as I go.
Feldman from Philly to Florida. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm great. How are you?
Great. So, Steve, tell us, who were your parents or any other important relatives that you had growing up?
Well, Robert, how about if I start with my grandparents?
Sounds good.
All my grandparents were from the Ukraine. Of course, around that time, around the 1900s, most of the Ukraine actually was taken over by Russia. They were all Jewish, and of course there were pogroms back then, but the pogroms got really bad a little after the 900s. I think they started calling them bloody pogroms. So my grandparents wisely decided to get out of Russia, being Jewish as they were, and they emigrated to the United States. So when I was alive, my grandparents that were living, there were two of them. It was my dad's mom, whose name was Annie or Ann. Annie actually turned out to be his wife's name, my father's wife's name. And then my mom's dad, his name was Abraham. We called him Abe. Now, my father's father, he was a tailor, and he died when my father was very young. He died when my father was only about 14 or 15. He had a contract, even though he was Jewish, he had a contract with the Catholic Archdiocese to tailor the uniforms of the children's clothing. And he got friendly with the Monsignors. So my dad became a whiz at tailoring. So when my grandfather died, my father had to take over the business to support the family. And my father was able to do this. If you wanted to have your pants altered, you could put the pants on, and he would just look at them, maybe make a few bends, but he would not use any pins or chalk. You took the pants off, you put them in the sewing machine, and within a few minutes, you can put it back on, and they fit perfectly. It was really amazing.
Wow.
So, and I forgot to mention that my mother's father, Abe, he was a house painter, just to be more complete. So my father eventually started to work in appliances with a businessman who actually owned 13 stores all over the East Coast, but especially New York. He was from New York. And my father eventually became general sales manager, and he had to go to all...
Wow.
Accent furniture. Safe cabinets in every style for others.
Hey, that's actually a good thing because it means he's got enough people watched it that there's advertising.
Abe, he was a house painter, just to be more complete. So my father eventually started to work in appliances with a businessman who actually owned 13 stores all over the East Coast, but especially New York. He was from New York. And my father eventually became general sales manager, and he had to go to all 13 stores periodically. So a lot of times he took the family with him, my mother and I. So what happened was I was really brought up in hotels until I was 5 or 6 years old. And we would be eating in these hotels dinner, and I had an aversion to vegetables. I didn't want the vegetables.
I think you still have that same
I
aversion.
still have that problem.
Right.
Yes, Robert, I still do. That's right. So I would shun the vegetables, and my mother got embarrassed in front of all these people at the restaurant, and she wouldn't push the vegetables on me. So to this day, I don't eat very many vegetables, but my darling wife has pushed several on me. So I think I'm up to maybe 5 or 6, or something like that. My mother's name is Annette, but we just looked at her birth certificate, and her name was actually Annie. And she worked for Sears, she worked in the catalog department. And people would actually call her up and say, hey, could you give me the name and the phone number of the girl wearing that bra on page 27? And of course my mother had to say, I'm sorry, I don't know that information. So when my mother got married, she started doing secretarial work for my father, and she worked until 5 o'clock downtown. She came home, and she didn't feel like fixing dinner, so a lot of times we'd go out to Horn and Hardart for dinner or Lytton. So I got used to the mediocre food, but I liked it very much. On my mother's side, my mother had 5 siblings, so I had 10 tremendous cousins. We were all very close. We all lived within 20 minutes of one another. Some of us lived within 5 or 10 minutes of one another. And when I was growing up, we would take turns visiting each other's home. And I especially visited my cousin Al in Brooklyn and my cousin Ed Finkel. And I also had a cousin who actually lived on the block, and her name was Marcia. She was a few years younger than me, so she was too young to trek the couple blocks to go to the movies. So I would go down to her house and take her to the movies, which her father appreciated very much. And we would see things like The Wizard of Oz and Flash Gordon episodes and the cartoons. And her mother's name was Morris, and he was actually born in Russia. And we saw his birth certificate, and we found out that the family name in Russia was Gasetin. When my grandfather came over to this country and they asked him his name, he thought that name was a little long and it sounded too foreign, so he changed it to Gard, and they asked him how to spell it. He said G-A-U-R-D. He misspelled it. So to this day, almost, but mostly when I was younger, I was always confused at how you spell Gard.
Well, I think one thing I'd like to hear more about was about your dad eventually quitting his management position.
Oh, I did mention that. Yeah, my father was really the nuts and bolts of the business. And he was not like in the contract. And for years, he was trying to get the boss to put his name on the contract, because he knew eventually that the owner was going to turn the business over to his 2 sons, and he was afraid that the sons would cut him out. So he insisted on getting into the business, and the owner refused to do that. So my father quit, started his own appliance business, knew everything about it from his previous occupation, and he would have commercials for his appliances, which were vacuum cleaners and sewing machines, and eventually washing machines too. And Ed McMahon, who you might have heard of, and Dick Clark, especially, would do his commercials like on American Bandstand every day.
Wow.
He was on there. And everybody in Philadelphia heard of Quaker Soda. That was the name. So when I had dates, I would say, my father owns Quaker Soda. And the girls would always know what I was talking about. They always thought I was rich.
Okay, sounds good. Well, so that was really good, Steve. Good start. So tell me, where were you born, and when were you born, and early childhood memories like schools, places you lived in, teachers, family events.
Okay, Robert. I was born in Philadelphia in a section called Almy, and we lived there for 5 years, so obviously I don't remember much, except that we had a cat, and I hated to go to sleep in a really dark room, and I still don't like to go to sleep in a really dark room. When I was approaching 5, and approaching the time I needed to enter school, we moved to an area called Oxford Circle in Philadelphia, which was in the northeast, and we had a row house with 3 bedrooms, so I had a bedroom and a playroom. That worked out pretty nice. I actually lived in that house for 19 years until I joined the Air Force and left home. They were building a lot of houses in the area about then, so I went to brand new elementary schools for actually from 1st grade all the way to 7th grade. The first school was Solace Cohen. I remember I had a good friend named Martin who had ringworm. He was a good friend of mine. And if he took his hat off, you could see the bandages on his hat. So we used to go up to an unsuspecting pupil during recess, and Martin would take his hat off, and we'd both go, ringworm! And the kid would run away.
So are any of these schools still around? Or?
Well, that's a very good question, and I actually think they are. I was going to look it up,
Okay.
but I didn't get around to it. The second school I went to for 3rd and 4th grade was Spruance. I had Miss Kramer, And she was into creative dance therapy before it was even, now it's called dance therapy. And she would arrange all the desks around the walls, and she would have us dance in the middle to things like the Nutcracker Suite. I fell in love with the Nutcracker Suite. I fell in love with Tchaikovsky, and we just danced and moved around. And it was a way of getting us to relax, maybe after lunch and that sort of thing. And there was a drama club. I got interested in drama, and Miss Kramer produced a production which featured us as soldiers coming down the aisles of the auditorium. And we went to ice cream shops, and we got these 5-gallon drums of ice cream. And we painted them to look like drums, and we put string on it so that they were attached to us. We had drum sticks, and we came in to the March of the Wooden Soldiers, and it was cute. For 5th and 6th grade, I went to Moore, and there I became a safety. This was before the age of crossing guards. They used students. To be the crossing guards, which wasn't really a great idea, because the guy in charge would catch me socializing with the children instead of watching the cars that would come by, and I forgot to put my hands out once, so I got a demerit for that. Now, in 6th grade, I had a teacher named Miss Ronahan. She had a piano in her classroom, and when I was in 5th grade, I could hear the piano constantly playing, and the kids were singing songs, and I said, boy, I hope I get Miss Ronahan for 6th grade. And sure enough, I did, and it was a lot of fun singing with her with the piano. Now, this was a time of rock and roll really coming into full bloom, especially in Atlantic City at a place that I worked called Steel Pier. I was very lucky because I got to know the guard, and he would let me in after work with my date, so it was a very, very cheap date. But I got to see all the stage shows for free, and we're talking about Frankie Avalon and Chubby Checker and all kinds of rock and roll groups that I didn't have to pay anything to see. Johnny Cash, who of course is more country than rock and roll, but a lot of rock and roll groups. Rick Nelson had his first appearance on Steel Pier, the first time that he went anywhere. And my cousin and I in Atlantic City, we got very much into water skiing. As far as family events, the biggest family event was going to Atlantic City for the entire summer. That was just wonderful. It was like an air-conditioned island because it was hot in Philadelphia, but much cooler in Atlantic City. And another family event that was a lot of fun is we would celebrate Passover over my cousin's house. There were 11 people there, my cousin's large family, and also my grandparents. And I just loved the gefilte fish, the bafta soup, and the raisin kugel. It was great.
Yeah, we saw Chubby Checker about 8 years ago.
Yeah, I couldn't think of all the names. That was Chubby Checker was one of the people.
Yeah, Summerfest.
Yeah, we just saw him, right.
So Steve, you did a great job talking about your early childhood. You've already talked a little bit about your teenage life. Let's get a little deeper about the magnet school you attended and WCEN, where you DJ'd.
Yes. Well, there were two magnet schools in Philadelphia, Central for boys and Girls High for girls. And you had to decide, you want to go to a magnet school or a neighborhood school. And I wanted to go to dental school, so I knew I needed to get a good college education to get accepted. So I decided if I went to Central, which was a more serious school to go to than a neighborhood school, I would have a better shot at it. I think it was the right decision, and I got a great education there. I got very involved, as you said, in WCEN, also called the Radio Workshop. I was the president and chief engineer. We would do DJ shows, piped in home speakers during assembly programs and in the morning, and I sort of got interested in DJing from that. And as chief engineer, I had to teach people how to use the dials in the control room, and I really enjoyed that. I thought I was pretty good at it. So I sort of became interested in teaching. One of the things we did at the radio workshop is we had an assembly program once a year, and I was the star of one of the programs where I played George Carlin. If you remember George Carlin, he started out imitating an all-night radio DJ, and we did that. There was a script, but I would ad-lib the script, and I had the audience laughing. It was a great feeling. My mother came to see it. She sat on the balcony. She said she was laughing hysterically. And we did it a couple times at Central for the upper classes and the lower classes, and then we also did it at Girls High. And we would go to the studio in the morning instead of going to homeroom and get together with our buddies, and I didn't have to go to homeroom. That was pretty good. I've already talked about the fun we had going to Atlantic City during the summer and seeing all those rock and roll stars. During the summer, I mentioned that my cousin and I got heavily into water skiing. It was fun going up to the boardwalk where the breezes were cool. And we also went to record hops, which were dances that were usually put on at the hotels on the weekends by Philadelphia disc jockeys. And actually, I had a pretty good record collection of 45s, with the ones with the big hole in the middle, because Dick Clark, who did commercials for my father, knew that my father had a teenage son, so he would give my father the records that were no longer popular. So I had a great collection of all these goodies, and one of the hotels found out about this, and they asked my cousin and I to actually put on a record hop, and which we did. And another thing we did during the summer, Alan and I, we would sneak into this pool in Atlantic City. Like when you walked in, you were supposed to give your room number, and we would just say, my mother already did it. And they never really stopped us. And we spent the whole summer sneaking in this pool every single day, spent the whole day in the pool and left. And nobody ever said anything until the end of the summer when the Miss America pageant was coming back. So we got to go in the pool. And back then, going out on a date, it cost $1 to go to the movies. We usually go to the movies and then have a pizza, even though we just had dinner. So I guess pizza was dessert, I'm not sure. And we would hang out at the bowling alleys to find out where the parties were, and that's sort of a summary of my teenage life.
Wait, could you give us a little bit of a George Carlin ad-lib? Can you do it?
Hey everyone, this is Silly Philly, and here on WEGG Radio, we're going to play the top 1,470 rock and roll songs from You'll Just Love It. So stay tuned for the next 6 hours. If I can stay up, you can stay up. Stay tuned.
Oh, that was great. All right, George. Oh, I mean, Steve.
So I have one more segment after this, and I decided, the most important person in his life was Ann, so, and Ann didn't know how you came across, but now I watched it again, I was like, wait a minute, she's very funny. So let's watch this next one, and then that will be it. So I'm going to start it right here, let's see if that works.
Every time I apply a liquid concealer, I feel like I've aged myself by 10.
Good. Being a professor has its pluses and minuses. You're going to make less money, usually, than you would make in private practice. But on the plus side, there's a lot more diversity of things you got to do. You got to go to more meetings, which is a little hard to do in private practice. I did enjoy lecturing a lot and giving seminars with dental students.
Okay, we're introducing Ann into the video now. So, Steve, tell us about how you met Ann and what she's meant to you throughout your life.
Well, as a single person, by some miracle of miracles, I graduated from dental school in 1967. I couldn't believe I was actually graduating. I immediately went to the Air Force after about a month vacation, and I was assigned to the 1601st USAF dispensary. It was a brand new dispensary. And again, by some miracle of miracles, Anna was later assigned there too. This was in San Bernardino. This dispensary had both a dental clinic, where I, of course, worked, and a pediatric clinic where Anna worked. I think Anna spent most of her time there giving injections in the buttocks to children because every time I visited her, that's exactly what she was doing. I actually initially met her, I don't know if she remembers this or not, but the orderly room is where you signed in and signed out for vacation and signed in to work there. And when I was signing out for vacation, which I did quite often, there was Anna in the orderly room. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
Okay. All right. So I went on leave, as I often did, and when I came back, and it was after lunchtime, who was standing right outside my operatory but that young lady I saw in the orderly room. And when I saw her, of course I was thinking she's quite attractive. I hope to get her to know her better. And there she is in my orderly room.
Was your operative room, I think.
I'm sorry, yes, my operatory. And she asked me for a piece of dental floss. And of course I gave her one. And then she came in the next day, and maybe every other day, asked me for...
No, not that often.
So I was wondering, does she want dental floss or does she want something else? So I decided to call her up and ask her out. And I did. And she gave me a resounding no. And there was no, but I'll take a rain check or anything like that. Usually when I ask girls out, if they didn't want to go out, but maybe that time, but maybe later, they would say, I'll take a rain check. But not Anna, she just said no. So I thought I was finished with the floss queen at that time. But fortunately, Anna and I had a mutual friend, Chuck Berkman, and apparently she talked to Chuck about this, and Chuck came to me or called me up and said, Steve, I think Anna would go out with you if you asked her again. And I said, well, Chuck, she said no. There was no, can I take a rain check or anything like that? And he said, no, just call her up again. I think she'll go out with you. So I did call her up again, and this time I didn't get a yes, but I got an okay. A lot of times I would ask her a question, and the answer was always okay. The yes didn't seem to be in your vocabulary.
I still do that.
Yeah, she still does that. So,
was that going to see the movie The Graduate?
Yeah, our first date, and it's one of my favorite movies because it's about the generation gap with Dustin Hoffman. Our first movie was The Graduate, and what she didn't tell me was a week or two prior, several weeks prior, she had seen this exact movie at the exact same place with the other single dentist whose name was Dan Lieberman, who later became my best man at the wedding. And little did I know that she had seen this. After a couple months of dating where we were seeing each other periodically, once or twice a week, maybe even 3 times a week, I was sure that this was the young lady I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, but I wasn't quite ready to propose to her, so I offered to buy her a car. And I don't know, the TV series I was watching, everybody was hooking up with somebody at home, so I thought, well, why can't I do this too? So I think, look, I'll buy you a car, you can come and live with me. No. You remember that?
Absolutely not. I wasn't going to be bribed.
She tried to buy her, and she wouldn't do it. So I was talking to my mother.